I raised my glass, smiling through the sting, as my son toasted me. The world's most expensive roommate. The table chuckled, polite and unsure, while my daughter-in-law swirled her wine like she wished she were anywhere else. Then he said it, calm, measured, like a diagnosis. "You've done enough, Mom. It's time you stop being a burden." The room fell quiet, but the damage didn't. I didn't cry, didn't flinch, just sipped my wine and realized something no one at that table expected me to. They thought I needed them. They were wrong. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. He raised his glass and said, "To Mom, the world's most expensive roommate." There was a ripple of laughter, polite, nervous. I couldn't tell if they were laughing at the joke or at me. Then Ryan added, looking right at me, "You've done enough, Mom. It's time you stop being a burden." The laughter died. Even Melissa shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes darting toward me before dropping to her wine glass. Nora, sitting 2 tables away, froze mid-bite. I saw it all, like I wasn't in the room but watching through thick glass. A second passed, then another. I picked up my glass slowly, my hand steadier than I expected. "Don't let them see it. Not tonight. Not here." I smiled, or something like a smile. "You're right," I said. "It's time I stop." I heard the words leave me, light and smooth, like I'd rehearsed them. But I hadn't. I just knew, suddenly and absolutely, that I'd had enough. There were toasts after that. Lighter, safer ones. Melissa thanking everyone for coming. A joke about how the oysters were probably older than her. Laughter returned in cautious waves. No one mentioned what Ryan said. No one ever does. You just fold it up, place it in a box, and bury it under the casserole dishes and cake. Nora caught my eye as I walked back from the restroom. Her brows were knitted together in concern. I gave her a nod, sharp, like punctuation, and kept walking. If I stopped, I might fall apart. Back at the table, I sat through dessert, swirling my spoon through a melting scoop of gelato, the colors blurring like paint. My mind wasn't on the food. It was elsewhere, quiet, focused. When the bill came, Ryan snatched it with a dramatic sigh. "Don't worry, I've got this one. Lord knows Mom needs every penny these days." Melissa shot him a glare. "Ryan." "What?" "It's a joke." "Jesus." I stood. "I'll cover my part." Ryan chuckled. "Come on, Mom, don't make it awkward." I looked at him, really looked. The confident posture, the self-satisfied grin. He had no idea what he'd just done, what he'd handed me, like a blade wrapped in ribbon. I put a 20 on the table anyway and walked out. The night air was cool against my skin. October in DC, sharp, but not brutal. I exhaled and watched the breath rise. Somewhere behind me, I heard the shuffle of chairs, the sounds of parting hugs. But I kept walking, heels clicking down the brick sidewalk, steady as a metronome. At the corner, I stopped. Nora's voice called softly from behind. "Elaine." I turned. Her expression was tight, concerned. "Are you okay?" I nodded. "I'm fine." She stepped closer. "Ryan was out of line." "I know. You don't deserve that. None of it." "I know." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small keychain light. "Here," she said, "for the walk home." I took it. "Thanks." "Do you want to come over for tea? Just for a little?" I hesitated. My throat tightened. "Not tonight." Nora gave a sad smile. "Okay, but my door's always open." I walked home alone. Each block, a memory. The time Ryan broke his arm chasing the ice cream truck. The tulips I planted this spring after Frank died. The years I gave, piece by piece, thinking it was love. Inside the house, I stood in the foyer, shoes still on, purse dangling from my arm. It was quiet. So quiet I could hear the fridge hum. I moved through the rooms slowly like I was seeing them for the first time. Photos of Ryan and Melissa on the mantel, a birthday card tucked under a coaster. My coat still on the chair where I'd left it this morning. I sat, not out of exhaustion, but because I finally knew something I hadn't before. They thought I was stuck. They thought I needed them. But I didn't. Not anymore. And that's when the idea landed. Clear, calm, and sharp-edged. I was going to leave. The rain started halfway through the drive. Fat, impatient drops tapping against the windshield like fingers drumming a warning. Ryan kept his eyes on the road, jaw clenched. He hadn't said a word since we left the restaurant, and I wasn't about to be the one to break the silence. Streetlights blurred across the window beside me, glowing amber through the rain. We turned down the narrow back road that led to the guest house. My wing. As Ryan liked to joke when company was over. Never mind that I paid for the foundation work, or that Frank and I had once planned to turn it into a rental property for retirement income. The tires crunched over wet gravel. Ryan eased the car to a stop under the overhang, engine idling. He finally spoke, voice low. "We'll talk tomorrow. About new arrangements." I reached for the door handle. "Don't worry, dear," I said, calm as still water. "I already have some ideas." He blinked. Just once. Then nodded stiffly and looked straight ahead. I stepped out into the rain, pulling my coat tighter. My shoes slipped slightly on the path, but I steadied myself and didn't look back. The car idled a moment longer, then reversed sharply and disappeared up the drive. Inside, the guest house was as I'd left it. Neat, modest, too quiet. I flipped the light switch, casting a warm glow across the kitchenette and small sitting area. The walls still smelled faintly of fresh paint and cedar trim. Ryan had insisted I didn't need much space. I remembered nodding politely, swallowing my own opinion like aspirin. I took off my coat and hung it on the hook behind the door. The rain tapped harder against the windows now, steady and rhythmic. I moved toward the bedroom, opened the closet, and knelt before the cedar chest. Inside, beneath folded quilts and a sealed envelope from Frank's last birthday, was the brown accordion file I hadn't touched in years. I carried it to the kitchen table and opened it slowly. Receipts, bonds, copies of tax returns going back to the Clinton administration. But I was looking for something specific. My fingers paused on a thin folder near the back. Porter Residence, Title and Transfer, Draft. I unfolded it carefully. There it was, the property agreement Frank had drawn up in 2013, after his second heart scare. Just in case, he'd insisted we protect the house from probate sharks, as he called them. It was all there. Our names in block letters, followed by a pending transfer of ownership to me upon his death. A clean arrangement. Except, someone had added a note in different ink. The signature block now read, "Joint ownership, Ryan Porter and Elaine Porter, pending full transfer." No date, no initials, just there. I stared at it, heat crawling up my neck. I remembered Frank telling me not to worry, that he'd taken care of everything. And I'd believed him. But Frank had died 3 months before Ryan offered to handle the paperwork. I'd been too numb to ask what that meant. Too grateful when he said I could stay here as long as I wanted. God, I even thanked him. I leaned back in the chair, eyes closed, listening to the rain. For a long moment, there was only the sound of it. Then I stood, steadier than I had any right to be. This wasn't sadness anymore. This was clarity. I opened the drawer beside the fridge and pulled out the old phone book I kept for emergencies. Flipped through until I found the name I hadn't spoken aloud in years. Hal Chambers, Frank's old business partner. The only person who knew where the real documents were buried, figuratively or otherwise. I picked up the landline, dialed the number from memory. 3 rings. "Hal?" I said, when the gravelly voice answered. There was a pause. Then, "Elaine? Well, I'll be damned." I smiled slightly. "I need your help." Hal's office hadn't changed in 15 years. Same dark oak paneling, same brass lamp with the little chain you had to yank just right. Same worn leather chairs that cracked when you shifted your weight. The only new thing was the framed photo on his desk. A girl in graduation robes, probably his granddaughter. Her smile was proud, untouched by anything complicated. I sat across from him, hands folded in my lap. There was a faint hum of an old radiator behind the bookshelves. It always ran too hot. I didn't mind today. He leaned forward, elbows resting on the wide desk. "Tell me everything." So I did. Word for word. From the dinner toast to the rain-soaked ride home. From Frank's careful preparations to the strange addition in Ryan's handwriting. The look on Ryan's face when I told him I had my own ideas. Hal listened without interrupting, just nodded here and there, his thick fingers steepled under his chin. When I finally finished, he blew out a breath and shook his head. "He's lucky you didn't throw the wine in his face," he said. I gave a small, dry smile. "No. He'll drink something stronger later." "Truth." Hal chuckled at that. The sound was low, rusted but real. "Well, that's one way to gut a man." In silence. I looked at him, steady. "I'm not here for revenge, Hal. I'm here to reclaim what's mine." That sobered him. He sat up straighter, eyes sharpening. "All right. First, we need to verify that that joint ownership note was never legally filed. If it wasn't recorded, we've got leverage. If it was, it won't be," I said. Frank was too careful. He'd never have signed off on that. And Ryan didn't have power of attorney. Hal nodded slowly. "Then, let's talk options. We can start with a legal reassessment of your estate. Redraw your will, pull title history on the house. But, if you really want to box him out, we could transfer everything into a charitable trust. Make him answer to that." That made me pause. Frank and I had talked about that once, about leaving something meaningful behind. Not just to Ryan, but to the community that fed us, held us up. We never followed through. I tilted my head. "A trust?" Hal leaned in. "You'd maintain control until your death. Then it all goes to a foundation. Literacy fund, women's shelter, veterans housing, whatever speaks to you. Ryan wouldn't get a cent unless you name him a beneficiary, which you wouldn't." I looked past him, toward the window. The rain had stopped. The light outside was still gray, but clean, like the sky had wrung itself out and was finally resting. "Perfect," I said softly. Hal opened a drawer and pulled out a legal pad. "Then we get to work. Quietly. You don't tell him anything." "Not yet," I said. He looked up. "You planning to?" "Oh, yes." I smiled faintly. "But only when it's too late for him to spin it." Hal started scribbling notes. "We'll need copies of everything Frank signed, plus the latest title from the county office. Give me a few days. And Elaine?" I met his eyes. "You're doing the right thing." I nodded, but I didn't feel vindicated. Not yet. This wasn't about right or wrong anymore. It was about agency, about undoing the invisible net I hadn't realized I was tangled in. As Hal wrote, I leaned back and let my mind drift just far enough to picture it. Ryan, standing in the kitchen, holding the envelope with my new will, his face shifting, from smug certainty to confusion to panic. And then, my phone buzzed. I glanced down. Ryan, are you home? We need to talk. Now. I looked at Hal. Let him wait, I said, and turned the phone face down. By Monday morning, something had shifted. I could feel it in the way Ryan's car lingered outside the guest house before pulling away, in the sudden flurry of emails from realtors I'd never heard of, in the way Melissa's texts changed from just checking in to, "Are you thinking about your next steps yet?" I didn't respond. Instead, I waited. Watched. That afternoon, I heard his voice through the thin walls as he paced the kitchen in the main house. My window was open a crack. He wasn't bothering to lower his. "No, the place is basically ready. Needs some staging, maybe fresh paint. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her." "Yeah, end of the month's doable." I stood perfectly still, the tea kettle hissing behind me. I didn't move until I heard the front door slam upstairs, followed by the faint click of his car alarm. He thought this was still his game. He thought I was still on the board. That night, a folder appeared on my doorstep. No knock, no call, just the quiet thud of paper against wood. Inside, a glossy brochure from a retirement community 2 towns over, a pamphlet about downsizing with dignity, and a draft lease termination agreement dated November 1st. No signature line for me, just Ryan's, already scribbled at the bottom like he was giving me the mercy of a head start. I didn't sleep. Not out of fear. Out of calculation. I lay in bed, eyes open, listening to the low whir of the ceiling fan and counting backwards from 1,000. When the numbers stopped meaning anything, I got up and made coffee. Melissa showed up mid-morning. She'd always been better at feigned sympathy than Ryan. Her expression was soft, her voice warmer than usual, as if she were rehearsing for an award ceremony. "I just wanted to stop by and see how you're doing," she said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. I gestured toward the armchair across from mine. She sat, adjusting her scarf like she was on a chilly veranda, not a 72-degree living room. "We're just worried," she said after some small talk. "The house is getting to be a lot, and I know how exhausting that must be. Have you considered somewhere with, services?" "Services," I echoed. She smiled too brightly. "Like assisted living. It might be easier. For everyone." I set my teacup down gently, the porcelain tapping against the saucer. "For everyone but me, you mean?" Melissa flinched, just barely. Then she exhaled, shifting tactics. "I just think it's time we started thinking long-term." "Oh, I already have," I said. "More than you know." Her mouth opened, then closed. I didn't feel the silence. After a moment, she stood. "Well, let me know if you need help sorting through anything." I walked her to the door and didn't watch her go. The moment she turned the corner, I picked up the phone and dialed Hal. "Advance the trust," I said, skipping the greeting. "Make it irrevocable." Hal didn't hesitate. "Are you sure?" "Yes. Once I file, that's it. You can't pull it back." "That's the point." A beat. "I'll fast-track it," he said. "Good. And Hal?" "Yeah? Make sure the title reflects the charitable transfer immediately. I want Ryan to find out when the realtor calls him." He let out a low whistle. "Understood." I hung up and returned to the kitchen, where the lease termination draft still sat on the counter. I didn't shred it. I left it there. Let him think I was considering it. I knew now how Ryan operated: charm layered over control, then manipulation dressed as concern. But the worst part was that it worked for so long. On me. On Frank, too. Near the end. But not anymore. Now I let him write his version of the ending, while I wrote mine beneath it, in ink that couldn't be erased. Out the window, a silver SUV pulled into the drive. A woman stepped out, clipboard in hand. The realtor. She walked up the path toward the main house. Not the guest house. I smiled. Let the show begin. By Thursday, the air felt different, sharper, purposeful. Hal called just after sunrise. "It's done," he said, his voice low but edged with quiet satisfaction. I stood at the window, coffee cooling in my hand. "Already?" "I don't sleep much these days," he said. "Everything. House, investments, accounts, even the annuities is now under the trust. You're the sole trustee until your death. After that, it transfers straight to the foundation. Ryan's name doesn't appear anywhere, not even a footnote." I exhaled, slow and steady. Good. Hal paused. "He won't realize until he tries to touch something." I smiled faintly. "That'll be soon." I could almost see it, the confusion, the flicker of panic. The moment the curtain slipped, the trust documents arrived that afternoon, delivered in an unmarked envelope by courier. I laid them out across the dining table, running my fingers over the embossed letterhead. The language was clean, deliberate, final, irrevocable. The word glowed on the page like a locked door. I signed every line, my signature steady, deliberate, unwavering. Then I sealed the folder and called Hal. "Filed within the hour," he said. When I hung up, I sat there for a long time, listening to the faint creak of the guest house settling in the wind. My pulse slowed, my breath evened. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt a quietness that wasn't defeat. It was control. That evening, Ryan came by without calling. His knock wasn't polite. It was the kind that announced itself. "Mom?" he called through the door. "You got a minute?" I took my time answering. When I opened it, he stood holding a manila folder, his tie loosened, his expression falsely casual. "Hey," he said. "Just wanted to go over a few things with you. Some refinance paperwork. Routine stuff. You know how these banks are." I stepped aside, gesturing for him to come in. "Of course." He spread the documents across the kitchen counter. "So basically, the house needs to be under both our names for the new loan approval. Just a formality." I glanced at the pages. They were full of jargon and highlighted lines that screamed urgency. I said, tilting my head. "A joint mortgage?" "Yeah, exactly." He grinned, the same grin he'd used since childhood when he wanted something expensive. "You don't even have to worry about the payments. I'll handle it." I looked up slowly, catching his eyes. "I'm afraid I don't quite understand, dear. Is this the same thing Hal's been working on?" He froze. "Hal?" "Yes," I said simply. "He's been handling my documents. We've been very thorough lately." Ryan's jaw tensed. "Mom, this is completely separate. You can't just go around changing things without telling me. There are financial implications." I smiled politely. "Of course there are." He slid the pen across the counter. "Just sign here and we'll keep everything smooth. I can take it to the bank tomorrow." I stared at the pen for a moment, then picked it up. Turned it in my fingers. "You know," I said softly, "why don't we discuss this at dinner next week? I'll make your favorite roast." He blinked, caught off guard. "Dinner?" Yes, I said. Next week. That'll give me time to read everything carefully. I wouldn't want to make a mistake. His smile flickered just for a heartbeat before returning. Sure. Dinner. He gathered the papers, a little too quickly, and left without another word. The moment the door closed, I let the silence fill the room again. The clock ticked in the corner, steady, unbothered. Outside, I watched him cross the lawn, his shoulders tight, his gait clipped. He glanced once at the guest house window, but I didn't move, didn't blink. He thought he was still leading, but the truth had already shifted beneath him, quiet and irreversible. Downstairs, in the drawer beside the stove, the filed copy of the trust gleamed under the kitchen light. I touched it briefly before shutting the drawer. Revenge didn't need fireworks. It just needed time. And time was already ticking toward him. The restaurant hadn't changed. Same dim lighting, same quiet clink of silverware and low hum of moneyed conversations. Same corner table, the one Ryan had commandeered for his birthday toast. I reserved it on purpose. The hostess didn't ask why I was paying this time. Just smiled politely and led me to the table, where the folded white napkins and polished wine glasses looked more like stage props than place settings. It was only 6:10. I liked being early. Ryan arrived first. Charcoal blazer, expensive haircut, the air of someone preparing to give a speech before he'd even taken his seat. "Mom," he said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. "This is nice." I smiled. "Just a thank you for all your support." He gave a soft laugh, clearly pleased with himself. "Of course. Family sticks together." Melissa showed up 6 minutes later in a cream blouse and too much perfume. She offered the kind of hug that was mostly shoulder. "This looks elegant," she said. "I thought we could keep it simple," I said. "A little dinner, a little wine, no surprises." Melissa's eyes narrowed just slightly. "You sure you're feeling okay?" "I'm better than ever," I said, and meant it. Across the room, I spotted Nora. She hadn't been invited, not technically, but when I asked her what she was doing Thursday night, she said she felt like a night out. She sat 2 tables over, a glass of white wine in front of her, and her phone discreetly tilted toward us. "Just for memory," she'd said. "I like remembering things clearly." The server poured. We toasted to nothing in particular. Melissa murmured something about a Pilates instructor in McLean. Ryan tapped his phone on the table like he was waiting for an urgent call. Then he leaned back with a satisfied sigh. "I closed on that condo in Logan Circle," he said casually. "Should be a great investment. Got a killer deal." Melissa blinked. "Wait, the one you said was out of reach last month?" "Yeah, well," he smirked. Things shifted. I used the family home as leverage, tied up the equity before the refi deadline. My hand didn't even flinch on the wine stem. "Oh, how wonderful," I said. "I'd love to see the paperwork someday. It's always interesting, the language they use." He grinned, pleased with the attention. "No need. It's all mine now, Mom. Don't worry." Across the room, Nora tilted her head just slightly and blinked. The way she did when something got interesting. I lifted my glass. "Oh, I'm not worried at all." The words came out soft, almost amused. Ryan chuckled, assuming it was my usual deference. Melissa glanced between us, something flickering across her face. Uncertainty, or maybe unease. It passed quickly. We ate. Small talk floated across the table like steam. Vacation ideas, condo renovations, a charity gala Melissa thought I might enjoy spectating. Ryan kept checking his phone, tapping it, scrolling, looking for confirmation from the world he thought he controlled. I let the silence build in between their words, filling the cracks. After dessert, a shared creme brulee I barely touched, Ryan leaned in again. You know, Mom, now that things are getting sorted, we really should have another look at those legal docs. Just to make sure everything's lined up. I smiled. I already have. He paused, then laughed like I'd made a joke. The check came. I insisted on paying. When the server walked away with my card, Melissa stared at me. Why tonight? She asked. I looked at her, then Ryan. It just felt like the right time to say thank you. Thank you for what? Ryan asked, frowning slightly. I finished the last sip of my wine, savoring it like punctuation. For making it so easy, I said. He didn't wait long. 3 days after the dinner, Ryan knocked again. Same sharp rhythm, same assumption that I'd answer. I did, though this time I didn't bother to smile. Got a minute? He asked, not waiting for a response before stepping inside. He held another folder. He always had folders now, like props in a one-man play. This one had a logo on the front I didn't recognize. A pine tree and some vague, friendly font. He laid it on the counter. Look, I've been thinking. It's time we talk about next steps. You've been here a while, and I've got things going on. Personal things. I need space. Privacy. I waited. This is a good option, he continued, tapping the folder. Peaceful, clean. They've got an activity director and shuttle service, I think. You'd be with people your age. I opened the folder. Photos of cheerful seniors playing cards, walking laps, holding plastic cups of orange juice, a 2-bedroom unit with beige carpet, laundry service, medication reminders. He looked at me like he was doing me a kindness, like I should thank him. I've already spoken to them, he added. There's a spot available next month. I closed the folder. Thank you, I said, and he visibly relaxed. That was the thing with Ryan. He only ever listened for the tone, never the words. After he left, I sat with the folder on my lap. I didn't cry. I didn't throw it. I didn't even sigh. I just got up and pulled out a suitcase from the back closet. I laid it open on the bed and began packing. Sweaters, slacks, the coat Frank gave me for our last anniversary. I folded each piece with care, as if I really were leaving. But I didn't touch the drawer with the trust documents. I didn't touch the flash drive Hal had given me, or the sealed file folder marked executor copy. Some things weren't meant for storage. That evening, Nora came by, holding 2 mugs of tea and that cautious look she wore like armor. I saw him in the driveway, she said, settling onto the couch. He looked like a man rehearsing a eulogy. Close enough, I said. She watched me for a moment, then glanced at the open suitcase. Are you actually going? I shook my head. Just letting him think I am. Nora took a slow sip. He's crossing lines, Elaine. I looked at her. He built the line. I'm just painting it in red. She didn't smile, but she didn't argue. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table with the soft ticking of the wall clock and the rustle of the wind outside. I took a sheet of linen paper from the drawer, the good kind, stationery Frank used to write donation letters. I wrote one sentence. Mr. Porter was made aware on date that no legal ownership or financial interest remains in the Porter family home or surrounding property. I signed it. No flair, just fact. Then I slid it into an envelope, sealed it, and wrote across the front in black ink, "For court use only." I placed it under the dish rack, where I knew I'd see it when I made coffee in the morning. Not to forget it, just to remember what silence can do when it's chosen, not imposed. Later, I turned off all the lights. brushed my teeth, pulled the comforter to my chin, and slept. Not the kind of sleep that comes from exhaustion or retreat, but the kind that comes when the final domino's been tapped and you know, without a doubt, it will fall exactly the way you placed it. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, I dreamed of paint peeling off old walls, revealing something clean underneath. He came in with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Late afternoon sun cut through the kitchen blinds, striping the counter with gold. Ryan stood in the doorway holding another set of papers. Crisp and freshly printed, as if truth could be made clean by formatting. "Hey, Mom," he said too brightly. "Just a quick thing." I turned from the sink, drying my hands slowly. "You've always got a quick thing." He laughed, but his fingers drummed the folder impatiently. "Just some final forms to wrap everything up. Consent stuff. The sale's almost through. Just need your blessing. Legalities." He placed the folder on the counter and slid it toward me like it was a birthday card. "Just sign at the bottom," he said. "Same signature as always." I opened the folder, scanning the contents slowly. The wording was careful but misleading. Pages of faux consent authorizing the sale of the primary residence for purposes of mutual financial security. My name already pre-filled on each page, a space left blank only for a signature. I looked up at him. "This locks in the sale?" "Yeah, but don't worry. You'll be taken care of." He smiled. "I'm not some villain." I reached for the pen and signed my name. The old way. Exactly the way I used to before Hal updated everything. The stylized loop on the E. The long tail on the R that Hal said was too easy to forge. I watched Ryan's eyes follow the motion, then dart down to the page, satisfied. He didn't realize he was holding a legal antique. When I handed the folder back, he practically bounced on his heels. "Perfect. You won't regret this. The new owners are cash buyers. It's going to move fast." Melissa arrived 10 minutes later. Whether she was invited or just smelled victory from down the street, I'll never know. She brought a bottle of sparkling rosé and a smile practiced in mirrors. "To a new chapter," she said, lifting her glass. I lifted mine. "Oh, it will be." We sipped. Ryan didn't notice that I drank only half. Melissa talked about the condo. "Modern, but with character," she said, and how they'd finally be able to host properly. Ryan joked about turning my old bedroom into a gym. I let their words float past like traffic noise. I asked no questions. I offered no protest. And still, they never thought to ask why. The next morning, just after 8 a.m., the quiet was broken by the unmistakable sound of tires screeching in the driveway. Seconds later, the front door slammed so hard the frame shuddered. I didn't flinch. Ryan stormed into the guest house, papers crumpled in one fist, phone in the other. "What did you do?" he barked, voice high and uneven. I looked up from my coffee. "You filed a trust dispute? You filed for a hearing?" I set the mug down gently. "My attorney did." "You signed those forms yesterday?" "No," I said. "I signed a copy, with a signature no longer recognized on any legally binding document. Hal made sure of that 2 weeks ago." He stared at me, blinking hard, like the air had been knocked from his lungs. "I gave you every chance to be honest," I said, "but you wouldn't stop pushing. So now we'll let the court decide. And I kept the envelope, by the way." He looked confused. "The one I marked for court use only," I added. "Dated, signed, documented proof you were informed." Ryan's face flushed deep red. He opened his mouth, then closed it. A notification dinged on his phone. He looked down, froze. then stormed out without another word. Outside, I watched through the curtain as he stood in the driveway, pacing in tight, furious circles, the way Frank used to before a bad hand of poker. The storm was coming. But for once, I wasn't the one bracing for it. I was the one who called it. The courthouse smelled like old paper and disinfectant. Everything about it was designed to shrink you. The ceilings too high, the benches too hard, the air too cold. But I sat straight, hands folded, a thin folder in my lap that held nothing but a single pen. Across the aisle, Ryan leaned back in his chair like he was at a performance he'd already seen. Melissa sat beside him, hands clutched around a designer purse, her smile brittle and stretched too tight. He looked good, I'll give him that. Confident, expensive, convinced. Hal sat to my right, his reading glasses perched halfway down his nose, a small stack of papers beside him. His calm was the kind that makes other people nervous. Judge Reed entered, a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled into a bun and the demeanor of someone who'd long ago stopped tolerating foolishness. The courtroom quieted as she took her seat. Case number 24371, the clerk announced. Porter versus Porter. Ryan leaned forward and whispered something to his lawyer, then turned to flash me a practiced, pitying smile. "This won't take long," he mouthed. Hal didn't look up. He just opened his briefcase, reached inside, and removed a single sealed envelope. Thick, official, stamped with the court's watermark. "Your Honor," he said evenly, "before we begin, I have a submission on behalf of Mrs. Elaine Porter." Judge Reed gestured. "You may approach." Hal walked to the bench, set the envelope before her, and returned to his seat without a word. Ryan frowned, leaning toward his attorney. "What is that?" he hissed. The judge broke the seal carefully, her eyes scanning the first page. Her brows rose. She kept reading. Then she looked up, expression unreadable. "Mr. Porter," she said, her voice calm but cutting. "Would you care to explain this?" Ryan's confidence faltered for the first time. "Explain what? Exactly?" She turned a page. "Your consent documents, filed last week, reference property ownership under your name. Yet the deed has been under the Porter family trust for nearly a month. You signed under false pretenses." Ryan blinked rapidly. "That can't be right. The trust, she interrupted, was legally executed and filed by Mr. Chambers here. Additionally, this letter includes corroborating evidence, a signed statement from Mrs. Porter dated 2 weeks prior, and—" she flipped another page. "An attached transcript and digital recording from your mother's birthday dinner in which you publicly stated she was, quote, a burden." Melissa's head jerked toward him. "Ryan, what is she talking about?" Hal adjusted his glasses, his tone mild. "Your friend Nora was sitting nearby. She keeps good records. Audio and video, both time-stamped." Ryan's lawyer fumbled through his briefcase, whispering in panic. "We weren't informed. There was no discovery on—" "There didn't need to be," Judge Reed said flatly. "Fraud nullifies prior agreements." Ryan's face reddened. "That's ridiculous. She's manipulating this whole thing. She doesn't even understand what—" "Mr. Porter," the judge said sharply, "you transferred property that wasn't legally yours. You used a forged consent to secure leverage for an unrelated purchase. That's not confusion. That's intent." The silence afterward was absolute. Melissa's hand trembled as she reached for her husband's arm, but he pulled away, staring straight ahead like a man watching his own house burn. Hal stood, clearing his throat softly. For the record, Mrs. Porter's only intention was to ensure her burden would never be financial. For anyone. The words hung in the air like the closing line of a verdict already written. Judge Reed nodded. Ownership of the property remains with the Porter Family Trust. Mr. Porter, you are hereby prohibited from accessing, refinancing, or listing the property in any capacity. Ryan slumped back, color draining from his face. Melissa whispered something sharp and low, but he didn't answer. Hal gathered his papers neatly and placed a hand over mine. His was warm, solid. You all right? He murmured. I nodded. Perfectly. As we rose to leave, I caught Ryan's reflection in the polished table, a man staring at his own outline, realizing too late he'd been erased from the page. Outside, the afternoon light was soft and gold, the same color as the blinds back home. I walked down the courthouse steps slowly, the air cool and clean against my skin. For the first time, the weight I carried didn't feel like armor. It felt like freedom. The headlines weren't public, not yet. But the consequences were already making noise in the quietest corners. The trust held everything now. The house, the guest house. The investment accounts Frank built slow and steady over 3 decades. Every asset with my name, my signature, and now, my sole control. Ryan and Melissa were locked out entirely. 2 days after the hearing, the condo sale collapsed. Financing fell through when the lender flagged the forged consent. Then their home equity line was frozen. Ryan's credit rating plummeted like a stone. The bank pulled his pre-approval within the hour. By Friday, the smugness had drained from Melissa's social media, replaced by vague quotes about resilience and pivoting gracefully. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Instead, I packed. Not from panic this time, from clarity. Hal had set everything in motion months earlier. One of the trust's quieter acquisitions was a 1-bedroom condo near DuPont Circle. Clean, bright. Walkable to shops and bookstores and that cafe with the buttery scones I used to sneak when Frank was watching his cholesterol. I moved in with 3 boxes, a single suitcase, and a copy of the final trust document tucked in a fireproof folder. The morning I left the guest house, I took one last walk through the yard. The tulips were nearly gone, stems tall and empty. But I didn't feel sadness, only relief. I didn't owe this place anything anymore. By noon, I had a kettle warming on the new stovetop and sun pouring across a rug I chose myself. No one told me where to put it. The phone rang around 4. Ryan. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. On the 4th try, I picked up. His voice was tight, furious, cracking around the edges. You embarrassed me, Mom. I said nothing. Do you even understand what you did? You humiliated me. You humiliated Melissa. I didn't humiliate you, I said calmly. You did that when you called me a burden in front of my friends. You just didn't think anyone would ever hold you to it. You planned this whole thing. I hung up mid-sentence. The silence afterward was rich, heavy with closure. A knock came at the door an hour later, gentle, polite. Nora. She carried a bottle of champagne and 2 fluted glasses. You said you don't drink on weekdays, she said. But I figured some rules are meant to be rewritten. I let her in. We sat near the window, the city humming outside. The cork popped loud and cheerful, and Nora poured 2 modest glasses. She raised hers. To freedom? I clinked mine gently. To clarity. We drank. The champagne was dry, crisp, satisfying. Nora set her glass down and smiled at me. That toast aged beautifully, by the way. I laughed, not politely but honestly. Which one? She tilted her head. The one where he called you the most expensive roommate. Ah, I said. That vintage. Delicate finish, she said, grinning. Sharp on the swallow. We fell into a comfortable silence, the kind only earned after months of unspoken truths and miles walked alone. Eventually she stood, squeezing my hand before heading for the door. What's next for you? She asked gently. I looked around the condo, the boxes half unpacked, the afternoon sun warming the hardwood. Whatever I want. As the door closed behind her, I exhaled. Then I walked to the small writing desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out a blank piece of paper. At the top, I wrote, "To be opened in the event of my death." Then I smiled, put the pen down, and started cooking dinner. I finally had the kitchen to myself. The silence from Ryan was louder than his anger ever was. A full week passed. No calls, no texts, not even a lawyer's letter. Melissa, on the other hand, vanished swiftly, slipped out of their shared condo and back into her parents' orbit in Bethesda. Someone told Nora they'd seen her at a yoga retreat, hands pressed together in apology for a life she hadn't yet owned. Ryan stayed behind in the mess. I read once that pride doesn't rot from the inside. It calcifies, locks a person in place, keeps them upright long after they should have crumbled. He wasn't reaching out because he still believed the world would shift back around him. That someone, maybe me, would blink first. I didn't. But I did wonder. Some mornings, when the kettle hissed too long or the floor creaked just so, I'd hear Frank's voice in my head, steady and kind. You sure you didn't go too far, Lainey? I'd never had to answer that before. Not seriously. Not until now. I told myself what he did was manipulative, cruel. That calling your mother a burden and trying to sell the house out from under her earned consequences. Still, there's a difference between justice and strategy. And I hadn't just neutralized him. I'd exposed him. I'd burned the part of the bridge that might have let us speak again. Nora came by one morning, catching me mid-thought, a basket of oranges in her arms. She watched me silently as I rinsed one in the sink, then said, "You didn't humiliate him. You educated him." I raised an eyebrow. "You think he learned anything?" "I think you stopped the cycle," she said. "That counts for something." The next day, I signed up for volunteer orientation at Greenpoint, a local nursing home with chipped paint, too much linoleum, and residents who were grateful for attention that didn't come with a clipboard. They placed me in a community room on Tuesdays, not for arts and crafts, but for something the coordinator called financial resilience for seniors. Mostly women, mostly quiet. Some were sharp, others slower, their eyes dulled from years of letting someone else handle the bills. One woman, Bonnie, hadn't looked at her checking account since 1998. Another still had her deceased husband's name on her car title, 23 years after his funeral. I started small. How to read a will, what a trust actually was, how to name a power of attorney who wouldn't treat you like a bank they forgot to close. I brought my own documents in 1 week, redacted, of course, and walked them through my story without naming names. I showed them the birthday toast, the forged forms, the envelope I marked, "For court use only." They asked why I didn't scream, why I didn't confront him sooner. I told them what I'd learned too late. Kindness without boundaries becomes permission. The room fell quiet after that. A few women nodded. One reached for my hand. It didn't feel like teaching. It felt like repair. Not just for them. For me, too. That night I lay awake longer than usual. The condo was still, a soft hum from the refrigerator the only sound. I thought about how easily silence becomes surrender, how long I'd chosen peace over dignity. Not anymore. Now I understood something Frank never had to teach me. You can love someone and still need to be safe from them. I closed my eyes, repeating the line in my head until it stopped sounding sharp. Then I turned over, letting the warmth of my own breath fill the quiet. In the morning, I'd go back. Same room, same plastic chairs, different voice. Mine. He knocked just after sunset. The sound was hesitant, not the sharp, claiming rhythm he used to have, but softer, almost polite. For a moment, I thought it might be Nora or one of the women from Greenpoint dropping off a thank you note. But when I opened the door, Ryan stood there. He looked smaller. Not physically. He still filled the doorway. But something in him had deflated. The posture, the polish, the quiet arrogance that used to hang off him like cologne. All gone. "Mom," he said quietly. I didn't move. "Ryan." He glanced past me, toward the soft glow of the lamp inside. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside but didn't invite him with words. He walked in, hands buried deep in his jacket pockets. Eyes sweeping the place as though cataloging what I'd built without him. The condo was warm, the faint smell of rosemary and garlic still hanging in the air. I'd been cooking soup. He sat at the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red around the edges, tired, not theatrical. "I lost the condo," he said. "The one in Logan Circle." I nodded slowly. "I assumed." He exhaled, shaky. "They repossessed it last month. I'm staying with a friend for now, just until things get back on track." I waited. There was a time I would have filled the silence with comfort, an automatic reflex to ease his shame. But I didn't. He looked at me, searching for the version of me that used to say, "It's okay, honey. We'll figure it out." When I stayed quiet, he swallowed hard. "I just need time to rebuild. That's all." I met his eyes. "You'll rebuild faster when you stop standing on people." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. For once. "I know," he said after a moment. "I know I screwed up. With you. With everything." I let the words hang there, not as apology, but as acknowledgement. A small one. Still, it was more than I'd ever gotten. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. "Melissa left. Said she couldn't handle the stress. I don't blame her." He laughed once. A dry, humorless sound. "Turns out when everything's in your name, it's real easy for everything to fall apart." "Hard lesson," I said softly. He looked up again, and for the first time, there was no flash of entitlement. Just a man stripped to the core. "Mom," he said quietly, "I miss Dad. I keep thinking, if he were here, he'd know how to fix this." I felt something stir in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but something neighboring it. The ache of truth. "Your father would have told you to apologize," I said, "and then to do better." Ryan nodded, eyes dropping to the floor. "I am trying." I believed him. Or maybe I just wanted to. I walked to the kitchen, ladled 2 bowls of soup, and carried them back to the table. The sound of the spoons clinking against ceramic filled the quiet. "Sit," I said. "Eat. You look pale." He did. He sat. He took a spoonful, cautious, then another, slower. The smallest sound of satisfaction escaped him. "You still make it the same way," he murmured. "Some recipes don't need fixing," I said. For a while, we just ate. The city hummed faintly beyond the window, muted traffic, the occasional siren, life still moving on. When the bowls were nearly empty, I set my spoon down and looked at him. "You're still my son," I said. That doesn't change. He looked up, eyes wet. Thank you. But, I continued, you'll have to earn being family again. He nodded, slow, deliberate, and for once, didn't argue, didn't defend, just absorbed it. We sat there in silence, the steam from our bowls fading into the air, the distance between us shrinking just slightly, not gone, but bridged by something small and fragile. When he stood to leave, he paused at the door. Can I call you next week? You can try, I said. After he left, I poured the last of the soup into a jar and placed it in the fridge. Then I stood by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. He was learning how to start over, and I was learning how to let him. Hal always called before he came by, but that afternoon, he just appeared. 2 knocks, firm but friendly. When I opened the door, he was standing there with his leather briefcase and a grin that told me he was up to something. Busy? He asked. Just reorganizing some files, I said. Old habits? He stepped inside, brushing a few late summer leaves from his coat. Well, I've got some new ones for you to organize. Thought I'd bring the paperwork myself. Saves postage. I poured him coffee without asking. We'd reached that kind of friendship. Quiet, practical, laced with mutual understanding. He opened the case, flipping through neatly labeled folders. The trust matures next year, he said. We'll need to finalize the inheritance terms before that happens. I leaned back in my chair. Already decided. Hal looked up, amused. I had a feeling you'd say that. Split it, I said. Half to the Greenpoint Foundation, their women's financial education program. The other half to Ryan's future children, if he ever has them. His brows rose. That's generous. Not really, I said. It's structure, the kind Frank would have wanted. Accountability with compassion. Hal smiled, shaking his head slightly. You've turned revenge into legacy. Maybe, I said softly. Or maybe revenge was just my training wheels. He chuckled. You've come a long way from the woman who thought she had to apologize for existing. I smiled faintly. She was temporary. He nodded, making notes with his old fountain pen, the one that squeaked slightly when it touched paper. The sound filled the room, steady and deliberate. When he looked up again, I could tell he wasn't finished. You mentioned wanting a conditional clause? Yes. I slid a folded sheet across the table. Add this at the end. He unfolded it, reading aloud. Ryan Porter may access his allocated fund annually only upon verified completion of volunteer service in an elderly care facility or community program supporting senior independence. Hal grinned, eyes crinkling. You've sentenced him to kindness. That's a life sentence worth serving, I said. He laughed, a deep, genuine sound that filled the condo. You know, Elaine, I've drawn up a lot of trusts in my career. Most end in bitterness or greed, but this one... He tapped the paper. This one ends in grace. Let's not rush to call it that, I said, though I felt the warmth behind the words. After he left, Nora came by, as she always seemed to do when the air shifted in my favor. She found me sitting at the kitchen table, the amended draft still open beside my cup. What's that look? She asked. The look of a woman who just rewrote the ending, I said. She leaned over to skim the page, then started laughing, the kind of laugh that fills a room from the corners out. Oh, Elaine, you brilliant menace. I'm retired, I said. Menace is all I have left. She poured herself some coffee and sat. He's going to hate this. He'll need to learn the difference between hate and humility. Nora raised her mug. to poetic justice. I clinked mine against hers. To evolution. Later that night, after she'd gone, I sat alone at the table rereading the clause. My eyes lingered on Ryan's name, the loops of the letters softer than I remembered writing them. I thought about the boy who used to fall asleep in the back seat after soccer practice, his hand still gripping the Gatorade bottle Frank had handed him. I hoped, truly hoped, he'd volunteer somewhere with sunlight and laughter, that he'd see a piece of me in the women he helped, that he'd learn gentleness isn't weakness, it's work. I sealed the new trust file, slid it into the drawer beside the stove, the same place the first one had waited, months ago. Only this time, the sound of the drawer closing didn't feel final. It felt like opening something else. A different kind of inheritance. It was the first time I'd ever walked into a birthday dinner without bracing myself. No pinched smile, no breath held under a corset of politeness. Just me, 64, standing a little taller, wearing the silk blouse Nora insisted I buy with the words, "You deserve to feel expensive, not just be called it." Ryan hosted it at a quiet bistro near Meridian Hill. Nothing flashy, nothing theatrical. A long table set for 10, mostly close friends and a few of the women from Greenpoint. No floral centerpieces, no photographers. Just linen napkins, real silverware, and sincerity so thick in the air you could smell it. He stood when I arrived, pulled out my chair, and said only, "You look beautiful, Mom." Not, "Wow, finally dressed up." Not, "You clean up well." Just that. Plain and clear. Dinner was slow and warm. Roasted chicken with lemon and rosemary. Soft bread. Wine poured with purpose instead of performance. Nora sat beside me, passing quiet glances every time a new plate arrived, her smile the anchor I didn't know I needed. Hal came late, briefcase in one hand, a small gift bag in the other. He gave me the bag without a word, and I set it beside my plate, unopened for now. The weight of it was familiar. Paper. Files. Nothing urgent. The kind of gift you save for after cake. Toward the end of the night, Ryan stood again. He looked nervous, like a man with a speech he didn't fully trust himself to deliver. He raised his glass. "To my mother," he said, voice steady but not stiff. "Who taught me value, not the kind you put on a spreadsheet." The table quieted. He glanced down, then back up. "She taught me value in patience, in dignity, in accountability, and maybe, most of all, in mercy." I didn't expect to cry. Not this time, but something cracked open gently like the seam of a soft-boiled egg, and I felt the warmth spill upward. Not grief, not pain. Release. The table applauded quietly. Nora pressed a napkin into my hand without a word. Hal gave me a long, knowing look over his wineglass. Even Ryan, my son, my echo, my hardest lesson, looked genuinely moved. Not proud of himself, just present. After dessert, Hal slipped into the seat beside me, placing the folder in my lap. "This one's official," he said, "not theoretical." I opened it. Inside, the public declaration of the Trust's activation, my final will, signed and witnessed, the donation timeline for Greenpoint, the clause for Ryan's future children, still untouched, still valid. Everything I'd built, through loss, rage, strategy, and finally clarity, laid out in crisp black ink. Legal, irrevocable, mine. "This means it's live?" I asked. Hal nodded. "It's real now. The whole city will know come next quarter. Endowments. Naming rights. You'll have a plaque." "I don't want a plaque." "Too late," he said, smiling. "The women at Greenpoint insisted. They're calling it the Elaine Porter Fund." Nora clinked her glass against mine softly. There are worse things to be immortalized for. I looked around the table, at people who showed up not because they had to, but because they wanted to. No one owed anyone tonight. No one was performing for control. Ryan caught my eye and didn't look away. It wasn't forgiveness between us. Not yet. But it was real, and it was enough. Later, walking home with Nora under a sky thick with spring stars, I said, "That was the first birthday I've ever actually liked." She looped her arm through mine. "Then let's make it the first of many." Behind us, the restaurant lights dimmed one by one. Ahead, the street curved into something quiet and promising, and somewhere deep inside, I could feel it. This wasn't the end of anything. It was finally, fully, the beginning. The morning was soft. That specific quiet only found in cities before the traffic begins, before the coffee shops hum, before anyone expects anything of you. Elaine sat at her desk by the window, a fresh cup of tea in hand, the steam curling up like breath. Sunlight slanted through the glass, catching on the small frame that hung just above her workspace. A simple, wood-bordered rectangle containing the very first letter Hal ever drafted for her. Not the trust documents, not the official filings, the letter that started it all. She read it again. "Elaine, you have every right to decide how your life is remembered, and who benefits from it. There's no cruelty in clarity. HC." Her fingers brushed the glass lightly. She spoke aloud, but only to the room, her voice quiet and clear. It wasn't revenge. It was respect. Reclaimed. On the desk sat a card, recently opened. Nothing dramatic. No flowers. No gift. Just a small folded square with Ryan's handwriting inside. "Thank you for not giving up on me." She'd read it 3 times already. The ink slightly smudged on the comma. The handwriting still a little too hurried, like he hadn't quite learned how to slow down yet. But it was his. And it was enough. She sipped her tea, chamomile, steeped properly this time, and let the warmth move through her. The room smelled of lemon oil and paper, the kind of smell she used to associate with chores. Now it just smelled like her life. Outside the window, the sidewalk glinted wet from a night rain, but the sky was blue, the kind of blue that promised brunch on a patio and someone remembering to bring jam. Her phone buzzed once. "Nora. Ready for brunch?" Elaine smiled. She stood slowly, carefully, not because she was old, but because some things are worth not rushing. She picked up her coat from the back of the chair, then paused once more by the desk. Her eyes lingered on the card, then on the letter. Then, at last, on her reflection in the darkened screen of her laptop. She didn't look younger, but she looked lighter. She didn't look finished, but she looked full. And when she reached to turn off the desk lamp, she said, to no one in particular, "Happy birthday to me, indeed." She locked the door behind her, the way Frank always used to. 2 turns, firm but never paranoid, steady hands, learned rhythms. A ritual of her own now. On the sidewalk, a breeze picked up, cool, clean. She walked without hurrying, past the post office, past the bookstore she'd started volunteering at on Thursdays, past the tree that always turned early in autumn, as if it couldn't wait to be beautiful again. She thought of Greenpoint, of Bonnie, who had finally added her name to her own bank account, of Hal, who still sent paper files even when email would do, of Nora, who insisted friendship was its own kind of inheritance, and of Ryan. He had started volunteering at a retirement center 2 neighborhoods over. Not just for the claws, Hal had checked. He stayed late some nights, played chess with a man named Leo who used to sell rare books and only spoke in questions. It wasn't redemption, but it was a beginning. And beginnings, she'd learned, could look suspiciously like endings until you were far enough away to see the difference. Her phone buzzed again. Nora, I got us a table by the window. The waiter's already flirting with me. Hurry up or I'll take him home myself. Elaine laughed, out loud this time. She rounded the corner toward the cafe, coat swinging slightly as she moved. And just before stepping inside, she thought back to that dinner, that toast, that word. Burden. It didn't sting anymore. Because now, finally, fully, she understood. He called me a burden once, but I carried the lesson, not the weight. And I set it down exactly where it belonged.